February 1st marks the first day of Black History Month in Canada. Black History Month is an opportunity to highlight the contributions, impact, and accomplishments of Black Canadians to their communities and to Canadian history. The theme for this year's Black History Month in Canada is Ours to Tell. It emphasizes the importance of the stories that Black Canadians tell of Canadian history and the contributions of the Black community in Canada. Joining us now to educate us about Black History Month in 2023 is Dr. George Day, an internationally renowned Canadian scholar on race and anti-racism studies. He's also currently a professor in the Social Justice Education Department at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. Dr. Day, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you, sir. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about this year's theme, Ours to Tell, and what it means for education on Canadian Black history in particular?
Yeah, no, the theme of Ours to Tell, right, comes from the idea that we have to tell our stories. We need to retell our stories, given that for the most part, our stories have been told on our behalf. So we need to restore our lives to present the story, which is not just about struggles, but also resistance, desires, pleasures, achievements, contributions. And that's why it's so important for us to tell our stories, which have been missing from discussions around African or Black history. And one aspect of telling our stories is also to make the point that we're talking about history, which is 365 days of the year, not just 1 month. And we need to tell that story.
A very good point that we need to talk about this every day of the year. Now, there's been a lot of attention drawn to anti-Black racism down in America, but this also exists in Canada. So what do we know so far about the state of anti-Black racism in our country and whether it's improved?
No, it's still a problem. It's a global problem, and Canada is not immune to it. Anti-Black racism is an international problem, and I think we need to admit to it. You cannot solve a problem if you are silent about it, if you deny it. And I think we have to be very open about it. It's not just in the US, it's in Canada. And I'm not interested in whether we are moving forward to what extent. It is still a problem. We need to address it. That's how we should take it, so that we don't get into this sense of complacency that we think, oh, well, we are better off than it was, right? It's still a problem. And I think when we hear events in the US, we have to think about, are there comparable events that we can also talk about in Canada, in Canadian context? And there are, and we should be able to speak about that so that we don't juxtapose the US with Canada. Canada becomes the good and the US the bad. That doesn't solve the problem. The problem is that we must admit anti-Black racism is a problem. It's an international problem, and Canada is not immune to it.
A very good point. It is an international problem. All right, Dr. Day. So for some further perspective, can you tell us a little bit more about the unique challenges that Black Canadians face even today when it comes to opportunities, socioeconomic disadvantages, and their overall standing in this country?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges has to do with what I talked about, the denial, right? For example, when we look at, say, questions of enslavement, right? We talk about it as if Canada was immune to enslavement, right? Canada has a history of slavery that we need to talk about. But we also have to admit that there are challenges within our institutions, whether it's education, health, law, the police, the media. And I think it's very, very important to see that these are challenges that we all are responsible to address. And it's not just a problem of, say, Black, Indigenous, and racialized bodies. Anti-Black racism is a problem for everyone, Black, white, yellow, brown, whatever you call it.
And what are your thoughts on Canada's response so far to anti-Black racism in the country? Has it been a good response so far? Is there things that the government still needs to do?
There's more to be done. I think there's more to be done. I think when we look at our educational system, to what extent is our curriculum reflective of an African history which doesn't start with slavery, an African history that goes back to pre-enslavement, an African history that sees Africa beyond colonization, an African history that sees the continuing contributions of African and Black peoples throughout our history, the totality of our experience, the totality of our existence, not just a particular period. African history did not start with 1492. And I think we need to teach about African history pre-1492. What are some of the achievements, contributions that continue to this day to inform the present? And that's how we should look at it. So there's more work to be done. When part of doing that work is action. It's not just words, admitting that it's a problem. If you admit that there's a problem, the next thing is then, what are we going to do about it? And this is why action is called for. And it's called for on the part of everyone, our schools, our politicians, right? Our police officers, our media. We all have that responsibility to talk about this history, the history of violence, the history of resistance, the history of denials and silences, but also the history of achievements and contributions. That's what I mean by the totality of our existence. And we need to tell that story.